See how international the group is today. Special thanks to Juan Hernandez, who's mentioned CCAF based design. We've got people from Trinidad and Melbourne and various places, South America and Europe. This is just fantastic. And I think you're not going to be disappointed because today we have a fantastic guest whose work I have admired for a very long time. Both of us have been slaving away in this industry, doing the best we can to improve the models that people are using for teaching through digital platforms. And there are some challenges. We'll be talking about those as well. But I always hasten to say that back when things were far more difficult to do than they are today and more expensive, computer time was so expensive, and we didn't have animation, and we didn't have color, and we didn't have audio, we didn't have touch.
With two rocks that could bang together.
That's right. When I started, the system I worked on only had uppercase letters, and they were kind of green on the background. So anyway, we've been working for a long time because we have seen the amazingly effective things that can be done with this technology to help people build their skills, gain confidence, and go out and perform more to their satisfaction and everybody else's. And that means a lot to one's life and one's career. So we've been working separately, but very much toward the same goals. And there are, in my view, a limited number of thoughtful thought leaders in this field. There are a lot of people who expound on how e-learning might best be done. And many of them have very good ideas, but we're not reaching everyone. The practice has, in fact, regressed in some ways after getting away from capital letters and really expensive systems where we had to carefully think through every interaction with the learner to make sure that it was effective and justified the time and the cost and the programming effort and so forth, And so a lot more thought went into the instructional paradigms that were being employed. Rich already mentioned that we formed the Allen Academy. It's something I'm very proud of. I'm proud of my studios who do custom work. And they work for, really great corporations who are demanding. And I love that when our clients are demanding and really want the best, not just the fastest or the cheapest, but they want to do something that's meaningful to learners. And so I want our industry to do really, really well. I want every learning experience for everybody out there to be well worth the time. And I know that's an impossible goal, but it's one that I've been shooting for a long time. And as I see the great work being done, I want to share not only what it looks like, because I think it's flattering when people essentially plagiarize an instructional design. There's no protection on instructional designs. And if you see one that's really great in working, you ought to use it. Learn from that and go apply it. But we've been trying to go further and be more proactive. And that's why we formed the Allen Academy for Learning Professionals. Is we will not hold any secrets back. We are willing and eager actually to share how we do things, what works and what doesn't. Nothing goes just, like you'd like it to. There are always challenges. And so we're more than willing to share our foibles, our workarounds, how we've recovered when things haven't gone right, and so forth. So it's with immense pride that I'm mentioning that Clark Aldrich has become a faculty member in the Academy and is teaching the course that we'll talk about on short sims, which is a really, really important method of creating a great learning experience. So I'm very excited about it. Clark's been, he's really a guru, and that's been formally recognized by Fortune magazine. And his work in educational media has been featured by, I got to look at the list here, but you could just say everybody. CBS, ABC, the New York Times, USA Today, ESPN, AP, Wall Street Journal, NPR, CNET, Business 2.0, Business Week, and US News and World Report, to name a few. Clark gets around, and so thankful that he does, because his message is so important. He's written 6 books, which I know writing books is, it's a big undertaking. The whole family has to be supportive of that, and all your friends, because it's so much harder than it looks. At least it is for me anyway. He's been a columnist for Training and Online Learning magazine, quoted by President Obama, featured on multiple magazines as in the top profession list, which clearly he is. He's created patented and award-winning programs that have earned millions. So he's gotten all the recognitions and at least some of the reward that he should have. And he's creator of Short Sims, which is a content model that popularized low cost, catch that, low cost, meaningful interactivity in educational media. He works on large and small projects to increase the success of this method. So welcome, Clark. We're so glad to have you here.
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled and honored to be here.
So there's so many questions to ask you, but let's just start with kind of the beginning. What drew you into e-learning originally? What got you into this crazy field?
Just a real obsession with education, just the realization that education had to be a major industry and had to be a major product, and we all had to get better at it. And so everything from the summer camp I both taught, was a camper at and a counselor at, was led as Camp Chewonki up in Wiscasset, Maine, and it was led by an ex-headmaster of sort of the Massachusetts prep school, who thought that summer camp could drive boys' behavior better than any school could, and so brought tremendous educational methodology around active learning and participation, which again, when you look at the way boys learn, it definitely changes the way you look at all learning. And then sort of evolving from there, and obviously working in when I joined Gartner Group, I really wanted to be part of the learning at that point, literally starting the learning efforts, and getting Gartner really focused on tracking learning and tracking online programs and going from there.
So you really had an analytical view, I'd say, from the very beginning. And I've heard you report on the industry at large, for example, and there are a lot of misnomers in this field that need to be set right. I think there's many misunderstandings. There's a lot of common wisdom about things. There a few things that I think about was as I reflect back in my graduate school work, nobody ever said anything about the negative effects of having a bored learner. I mean, I know that word isn't a scientific word, I guess, but if you bore your learners, their attention goes out the window. They start thinking about other things, and they're not present, and they're just not there. And so there's a lot more to e-learning than I think meets the eye, especially for beginners. But when you were starting in the field, what were the strengths and weaknesses that you were seeing?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of early enthusiasm. I mean, frankly, and there's also a lot of negative emotions. A lot of people wanted to push online learning because it was cheaper than classroom. And so, there's a lot of people saying, hey, let's cut the budget and do this stuff online and go from there. So that was a bit discouraging, perhaps. But they also drove it. They also, made it happen to some degree. There's a tremendous amount of confusion where people would say, I'm looking at Centra or Macromedia or Authorware. Which one should I do? And they're sort of comparing absolute, apples to oranges to elephants kind of thing. So I think there's a tremendous amount of confusion, but in a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of good people. I think I think the real thing though is that, in my opinion, content had to drive it, and content has not yet driven this market as much as it should. And I think I spent a lot of time both at Gartner and then post Gartner being unhappy with the quality of the content and the way that the content was put together. And so perhaps the thing that has driven me the most is saying, how can we rethink the experience of content? How can we, and I thought back then, and I have thought at various times that we're just on the wrong track. When we're thinking of content, we should not be thinking of workbooks. We should not be thinking of lectures. We should not be thinking of, the way we're in bullet points. We should not be thinking of all these things that were sort of tying us down. And so I spent a lot of time looking at interactivity as a primary motivator. And I think finally, again, within the last couple of years, I think I finally cracked the nut to my satisfaction, hopefully others as well, of, okay, this is how we can rethink online learning. We can change the cart and the horse and go from interactivity being the cart to actually interactivity being the horse.
Yeah. So obviously, well, maybe not obviously, I shouldn't say that to me anyway. Obviously, an active learner is getting more out of an experience than one who's sitting there passively, clicking the next screen and going on. And when my son took a summer job in car sales, he discovered that it was a large dealership and everyone at the dealership had to take e-learning, and there were penalties, potentially even losing your job, I suppose, if you didn't stay up with the training. So what almost everybody in the dealership did was paid the receptionist about $15 to sign on for them and go through the material, because it was just so painful. Nobody wanted to be there. And well, obviously,
I want to stop right there, because I think the pain of the way we present content is one of the most exciting opportunities for all of us. And I'm going to argue that most people find lectures painful. I'm going to argue that most people who sit down and listen to, even when you go to great lectures, even when you hear great speakers, at some point it becomes almost physically painful. We have the ability to cache a certain amount of traditional content. We have the ability to cache a certain amount of, Heather said death by lecture, and I couldn't agree with her more, and death by PowerPoint. But at some point, your brain just starts revolting and saying, I cannot absorb this information. And it almost, again, for some people, it could be 2 hours. For some people, it's 1 hour. For some people, it's 20 minutes. But at some point, our capacity to absorb linear content hits a wall, because it's like, again, we're caching it. We're not experiencing it. So, and then there's the workbook style content as well, where once again, you're good for a certain amount, and then it actually becomes painful. And I don't think enough people realize how painful learning is, in your example, the way that we've in the past presented it. And I don't think that's necessary, but I think it is, it's uncomfortable. And I think one of the great tragedies perhaps is that a lot of the academics are academics because they spend a long time getting really good at sort of expanding their cache, expanding their ability to absorb linear content before they have to exercise it. And the number of brilliant people, of great people, who have failed out of school because they didn't have that skill. They needed to bang on stuff. They needed to act against content in order to process it. So I think your point is, it cannot be understated, which is just how miserable learning kind of the old way has been for a lot of people.
And yet learning can really be fun. In fact, I maintain that they don't think about it, but in general, I think people play games because they want to learn. They don't think that they want to learn, but if you want to beat somebody at a game, you have to outplay them, which means that you have to learn to outperform them or outthink them. And as you learn more and more, you get better and better. And those rewards for learning are very pleasant. They're a lot of fun. And we play games even when we lose, because even that's still fun. And we learn from making mistakes, right? So
again, I want to grab that point right there and just a little bit, which is this notion of learning by mistakes is a really interesting one. And the issue of, no one in the world ever has bought a computer game hoping to win it the first time.
Right.
you
Better
don't,
not.
you play it in order to lose. You play it for the fun of losing. You play it for how you lose and why you lose and how do you avoid losing that way. But again, if you lost once and then learned and then played it, then won the game the second time, you'd be miserable. It's just, it's not what you buy the game for. You buy the game in order to lose. And I think, again, one more tragedy of a lot of traditional training programs is it focuses obsessively on the one brittle path of success. Here is the way to do it. And if you just follow these instructions, you will be successful. And that's not true. And it's a weird way of looking at it. But so part of the philosophy of short sims and part of my interest in how we learn is looking a lot at mistakes and how do people make mistakes? Why do people make mistakes? What are the consequences of mistakes? And always is a lot more interesting than the content itself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So someone just mentioned, even answering questions. Well, the answering questions as like in a post test of some sort is such an artificial thing. It's not performance. So you can answer a lot of questions about playing a violin and not be able to play one decent note on a violin, right? I think it'd be great for you if you'd be willing to talk about the power that simulation-based learning has and how it contrasts with what I call the tell and test, which is tell all your learners all the stuff that you know that they need to know, and then test them on it, which is the legacy thing that we use, which I think is very closely associated with painful learning. That's just not a great way.
So I mean, simulations can be great, and simulations can bring you into a world and give you decisions that have context. I mean, another giant problem is I can tell you, hey, when you're dealing with new customers, I want you to consider and balance 4 big issues. I want you to think, and you hear that, and that's sort of an academic paper, and you maybe take a PowerPoint presentation on the 4 ways you're supposed to be dealing with customers. But then you actually meet a customer, and how you apply those 4 things almost goes out the window. So at the very least, the notion of a simulation forces the instructional designer to think about how the content is going to actually be applied. I love more than anything thinking of content both tactically and strategically at the same time. I think it's very hard to present information strategically when you're not sort of presenting a little tactical interface into it. Here's what it looks like when you're actually doing it. So I think simulations get a lot of, frankly, simulations are good for the instructional designer because it forces them away from a lot of bad habits of just sort of presenting stuff in a very, high level, intellectual, conceptual way without doing the hard work of saying, yeah, but here's what it looks like. Here's the implications that it has when you're actually dealing with the world, because that's where it gets interesting. That's where it gets fun. And constructivism, Michael said, constructivism tends to be a way of learning academic content through a trial and error basis. And part of the fun, I think, of a simulation is actually moving away from academic style content. And again, a lot of the pain goes away when you are, if you're walking through your house and a doorknob may not work or a light switch may not work and you have to tighten a light bulb or something, you're learning, but it's not painful at all. It's sort of a learning by doing. And so part of the reality is that our bodies are hardwired to learn by doing. Our bodies are designed to try to do things, and we may or may not succeed. We may fail and we back off, we try it again. That's how we're wired to learn. And you mentioned again, way back, sort of the early computer systems. To some degree, I think of this sort of switch to short sims, this switch to simulations, and again, specifically short sims, as almost like moving from DOS to Windows or from the old PCs to the Macintoshes. It's like, how do we rethink content to be the way that we want to do it, like we do it in the real world? When Steve Jobs was talking about skeuomorphic design, how do you create something that behaves on the computer screen like it behaves in the real world? How much e-learning needs to have skeuomorphic design? How much learning needs to be discoverable? So I think it's this giant shift, and it's almost this huge relief. And we're going from this, again, bullet points and creating this sort of academic-y style content to how do we create a little mini scenario and have this learning be around those little mini scenarios in a way that feels satisfying. Someone once said of an Apple computer, oh, this computer gets me. This computer understands me. No one's ever said that about a Windows device, at least not within the last, not in the last couple of years. Maybe they have recently. But it's that notion of I want to take a learning experience that gets me, that follows my grooves, not forces me to sort of put myself into this, absorb the cognitive load of having to do all this translation myself. So there's a lot of really exciting things about simulations that I think we're opening up here, a whole new language.
Absolutely. And I know you're familiar with what I call my CCAF model, which is establish a context, challenge the learner, give them a wide breadth of actions that they can take, and then in feedback, show them the consequences of what they've done. And you sort of minimize the instruction, if you will, the academic nature of it altogether. And in fact, I have trouble with a number of clients who, like the rest of us, have spent so many years suffering through the academic model that somehow that people think that's a good model. That's the right model. That's the way it needs to be done, right? And I say, I don't even want to start with much of an introduction. I like to put you in a context that seems authentic, that's one that you can imagine yourself in. With some responsibilities that you would reasonably have. And then a problem comes up and you need to, or a challenge, you need to meet that challenge. I think that's, go ahead.
Part of the thing we talk about in a class, in short sim class, is can we boil down the context to a statement that is, you are a blank and you're doing blank.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Or a reporter and you have and your client is mad at you. You are, you have a bucket of water and you need to put out the fire. And it's just like, how do you focus the entire, experience on this very, very simple, you are a blank and you have to do blank. And starting off there, if you, again, in the last class, if students can't do that, if they can't narrow it down to that simple context, then we work on just focusing it more and more and more. And I think that the first part of simulation design is sort of making everything as absolutely simple as possible. And the second part is actually getting a little more complicated again. But it's absolute laser focus. You are a blank and you've got to do blank.
It sets it up, it makes it authentic. It communicates all those things that people try to communicate when they list a major style objective at the beginning. We are using that as concepts of objectives, but instead of writing something really boring, we express the objective by saying, here's the challenge and the situation that you're in. And right away, the learner knows what this whole course is about, or what this segment of the course is. I don't have to tell you what it's about. You see it, you feel it, you're there, right? And so it communicates far better, I think. So I think that many people aspire to using simulations in education, but they think simulations are, oh, wow, that takes a mega budget. That's really expensive. That's really hard. We would do that if we could afford it and we had the time. What I think you've brought to the field that is so exciting and so refreshing is that it doesn't take a mega budget to do a simulation based. And in some ways, it's simpler than going about what people talk about the traditional instructional design. And it's especially in e-learning. E-learning is pretty new, right? And I do think we got off on a bad foot with what people now call traditional. But how do short sims make learning through sims practical and affordable?
Sure. So, and again, someone in the comment, I'm so sorry, I forgot, I didn't see whose name it was, but was sort of saying exactly that question. How do you make them affordable? And if we can pop up the screen video, that might be useful at this point. So my goal with a short sim is to create a 10-minute short sim, which again is a good length, a 10-minute short sim in about 40 hours using no exotic skills. So that's my criteria. Can we create a short sim? Can we create a short sim about 40 hours of time? That's 40 hours of the developer time, and then we probably do a 1 hour subject matter expert interview as part of that. And so the question became, how do you rethink? And this is an example of one. This is a free one. If you want to use this in your organization, you're more than welcome to. On returning to the office after quarantine and dealing with sort of the COVID style. All of these graphics are clip art. They're clip art that I've modified. So they're vector-based graphics that I sort of, mushed around a bit and did it. So I'm a huge fan of clip art wherever we can use it, building it out. One of the great ahas of building a short sim, because it's easy to get lost. If you're just building a simulation almost without a good methodology, it's easy to get lost. You can truly get sucked up and get spit out by it. One of the most important things in doing a simulation, once you have the topic, is when you're interviewing the subject matter expert, you ask them this specific question: what are common mistakes made in this area? And if you focus on that question, what are common mistakes made in this area? There's the other one, which is what is the right way of doing it? But mostly, what are the common mistakes made in this area? If you do that, your expert, being an expert, will go through the list of problems, and then you can take that list of problems, and that becomes to some degree your curriculum. And so the question is, how do you take that list of problems and make it into an interesting, scenario, or maybe 2 or 3 scenarios that are all tied together. So you take that list, you tie them together. You put a tiny bit of story around it. I mean, most of my stories have sort of the good night moon basic of, good morning, here's your day, then go to bed at the end of the night kind of thing. So it's a really good generic narrative. And then you can put it together again, 40 hours, and you can create this kind of experience that's mapped to the real world. Again, using things. One of the other kind of someone asked me if they need great technical skills to create this kind of simulation. The answer is really no. Probably the thing that you need the most of is empathy. You need to sort of be sympathetic for your learners. You need to be sympathetic and understanding what the situation entails, and then sort of bring that empathy and into the sim itself. And I've seen some of the students from the Allen Academy who have gone through the short sims, and they've created incredibly empathetic simulations. You really feel like you are the center of the universe, that the person who's creating the sim has really, really there to help you, and your guide and your mentor. And it's an incredibly warm feeling having this thing with you. One more thing that you'll probably see is that, we do have a coach character. And coach characters are great. They save you time, having the person do a bit of narration, a little bit of linear content at the right moment. In some cases, when the graphics are too hard to do, we have the coach say it. So if I don't want to create a graphic of someone walking by a crowded hallway, you just say you're approaching a crowded hallway, and so it's a really fun thing to take as many shortcuts as you possibly can while still maintaining the integrity of the learning experience and the fun of it too, hopefully.
It's just really exciting. I do want to mention to all of our people online that we'd be delighted to pass on your questions. So this is your chance to talk to the expert, and we would really like to facilitate that as possible.
Great. Peter, should I ask a question? I'll grab that one. Clark, could you describe the potential for short sims to change post-COVID-19 higher education? And there's all different levels to that question. I mean, first of all, I'm certainly finding that once people learn through short sims, they don't really want to go back to the old way. And so I think there's an incredible appeal here. And there's a risk too. If you are a higher ed institution and you start going down the short sim path, you really gotta fulfill it. So so it's really, so it is really important. I think there's an interesting, much more subtle change that short sims represent, because if I'm writing a book, I'm the expert, I'm the smart person, you're buying my book because I'm so smart, I'm gonna do it. If I'm going to a lecture hall, then again, the professor is the smart person or whatever. When you're designing a short sim, you're really building it around the learner. And so I'm very scared of a directive style leadership, of trying to be bossy to the learner. And again, no one likes being bossed around. No one wants to have to be bossed to learn, nor do they want to, recite back what you've learned from being bossed around as to, to get your A. You want to start experimenting and playing with it a bit. This is a ransomware sim. We've gone from different viruses now. And so I think that is this notion of being able to change leadership. One of the huge problems of higher education is this directive leadership style. I'm the boss and you're the not the boss, and I'm going to tell you what to do. And I think we can potentially change the entire culture in higher ed from being tops down to more collaborative. I think that is incredibly exciting.
Absolutely, for sure. So how are you feeling today? Are you optimistic that we're going to see some significant and hopefully fairly speedy change in direction of what people are doing with e-learning? Or do you think that we're going to see people hanging on to putting up basically their PowerPoint slides, or their even their graphics and their text and so forth, and then asking questions?
I think we run, I'm very, very excited right now. I'm so excited about this whole short sim model as being the way. Again, it's non-proprietary, it's technology independent. You can build great short sims and never do anything, I never get a dime from it. It's not a matter of, oh, here's this great proprietary linchpin. No, it's out there, it's free, anyone can do it. Lots of different tools that can support this, and I believe more will be too. Yes, the tools, the sims here, a lot of them were built in Branch Track, but there's a bunch of great tools out there. iSpring, you can go through a long list of great tools that can support it. It's technology independent. All the graphics are done in PowerPoint using clip art, so even people like me can look reasonably professional. I'm excited because, again, this is done fairly easy, fairly efficiently. There's no exotic skills needed. I do believe that there's going to be a chasm between the old school and the new school. And I do believe that there's sort of the old school people who grew up in PowerPoints and presentations and workbook style content are going to keep pushing that. One thing, when someone sort of asked me, how long does it take to learn how to do short sims? I sort of say, well, if you've never done any instruction design before, it'll probably take you 40 hours to learn how to put together a really decent short sim. If you are really good at instructional design, it'll probably take you 80 hours. I think there is a lot of unlearning a lot of the skills. And so again, I'm more excited about the next generation for whom this kind of short sim approach is absolutely natural. Like, of course you do it this way, why wouldn't you? As opposed to, oh, but what about the 7 bullet points that we really want to make sure people all learn? So I'm very excited about it. And I think the ability to break the cost down and break the time down and break the skill barrier down to this 40-hour, no technical skills needed thing is the revolutionary. And again, the fact that people, once they take a short sim, want everything to be a short sim. Once organizations start down this path, they really, really don't want to go back, and they keep shifting that balance. So I'm incredibly excited. I think over 3 years, we're going to see a major inversion, again, from interactivity being the cart to interactivity being the horse in the content, the thing that drives it. We still need linear content, but it's going to be much more as an after action review or debriefing or little segments of it sprinkled in based on your decision. So I'm very excited.
Well, I'm really encouraged to hear you say that. It's as the hair continues to fall out and the wrinkles seem to come on, I realize that I'm not going to get to do this for another 50 years. But I would really like to see us, starting to realize the potential that's in front of us. I have this axiom. I mean, I've seen such great success. That's why, I keep working in this field, because I love bringing an empowering learning experience to people. Each person who benefits from it provides so much reward back to whoever created it. I just think it's really great. But it's been hard to convince people to move out of more legacy-based models, and those models are being taught around in many schools as well. So unfortunately, we have kind of a battle to continue working. But if things turned around in the next 3 days, boy, I would just be overjoyed.
If you went around e-learning vendors, so again, I've been battling this content thing my entire professional life of trying to drive better content, believing, and I still believe, that e-learning is not going to happen in any satisfying major way until there is this ability to do strong content. And what strong content means in my mind right now is sort of the short sim approach, even more than dense computer games, and certainly more than workbook style content. So I do think there's no going back. Sorry, I interrupted you. Keep going.
No, that's all right. I was just going to say that Melissa is asking, what are your thoughts about Sims and virtual instructor-led training? How can they be used together?
I think short sims are really good to push out to students and say, let's play, play a couple of short sims. Here they are, and then let's come together and talk about it, or then let's come together. So use the short sims as background reading. So some short sims are self-contained little nuggets of insight, which are great, and those are really fun. Some short sims are a little more open-ended, a little more messy. In the example sheet, the one on the bottom there is a less tidy, lesson learned, and so. It becomes a case study that a bunch of different people play through. Then they can discuss in forums what strategy they chose and what result they got, and why they did that. And then they can come together as a class and sort of say, well, you may have noticed the first time you played it, you spent too much money here, or you offended this person, or you whatever. That's normal, or whatever. And so it becomes to some degree a shared prop, in the form of pre-reading or post-reading or something. That I think does align groups. I think a great need of virtual learning is going to be interactivity, and how do I as a professor create activity or use other people's interactivity in a way that aligns with my course. And so I think it's going to be incredibly necessary to have as sort of this. It's also emotional, and the other, the good, as you mentioned at the beginning of this discussion, is short sims or good interactivity, full stop, including yours, including mine, is exciting. It is fun. You do feel the fun of learning something, and I think that is something that online learning can get very emotion-free very quickly. Someone described it as, virtual work as potentially being autistic in its relationship. And I think you do need to sort of re-inject a lot of experiences, including shared experiences. And I think the ability of one, here's an example of that COVID sim I showed you. There was an HR group, there's a bunch of them actually, who were coming together for a meeting, in a virtual meeting about how do we open up our workplace. They use that COVID sim as pre-reading. Say, everyone play this sim, and now let's get together and talk about it. And that experience, again, this 10-minute experience, focused their discussions immensely, and including of, oh, we got to worry about this, and we don't need to worry about this and stuff. So I think the notion of short sim as pre-reading is very, very powerful for a lot of these classes.
Yeah. Some things one discovers by accident, and I remember way back in the early 70s when I was doing some early e-learning, and we couldn't afford to have enough computers for all the students in the class, so we doubled them up. And even though our programs were all written for a single learner, we actually found that having 2 or 3 students per computer was more effective. And I've seen this happen, this effect since then. Many times we are often showing simulations at conferences that we've done. And one of them is an emergency situation where there's been an explosion, and there's a school bus that's damaged, partly on fire, and people are running and screaming and so on. And you are a first responder, and you need to decide what to do. And we try to keep the options very open, so you can run right in there if you want to, and or you can call for backup, or and there are just many options. A number of things that you do turn out to be bad things. Like there's a woman standing holding a baby, and she's screaming, and with empathy you can run toward her, but it turns out there's a secondary explosion, and if you run toward her, you trip it, and it's worse. Just give you a little background of what that simulation is like. But when we show that in audiences, what's really fascinating is the conversation that goes on about what shall we do. And that's what we saw when we had multiple students, even though they could only give one answer because it wasn't written for multiple people. They would debate about what to do, and that conversation among the learners was a beneficial add-on to the learning experience. So I think Sims can be used in so many different ways, and they're terrific.
Sonia asked a question, what if your content is much more boring than a burning building? And I've worked with some of the most boring content imaginable. I've worked with some clients who have, there's only one way of doing something, and it's absolutely brittle, and it's so absolutely boring. And literally you spend the first day or two and, you know, I mean, by day or two, just sort of, you know, as you're brushing your teeth and taking a shower kind of stuff, thinking like, what about this is interesting? What about this possibly is interesting? And I can almost guarantee you, I've not found content that's so boring that does not have some really interesting, profound insights into it. And that's where you, again, you have to get both, think high level and low level at the same time. You know, what are the philosophical implications? What are the chemical implications? What are the organizational implications? Whatever. So, so it's an incredibly exciting, it's really, really fun to say, where is the fun in this? And if you do ask the question, again, if you're given, you know, do 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, then 5, it's always going to be boring no matter how exciting the content is.
Yeah.
If you get into the mistakes, if you understand the mistakes, if you try to seduce the player into making a real world mistake, especially if it's a mistake they would make in the real world, then that is really fun. It's a fun design challenge. And then also, playing out the implications of the mistake are really interesting, because suddenly things that can seem incredibly simple can suddenly become incredibly interesting. So I've never had a simulation that ends up being boring.
No, they don't, do they?
But I have had topics that where you go, I've really, really got to work hard. Typically, the more you know about something, and again, experts, it's so much fun talking to experts. I mean, one of the joys of this industry is I get to talk to some of the smartest people in the world who are on the leading edge of some of the most important things like cybersecurity, but even, you know, or banking issues or whatever. It's a real fun of this job, by the way. A real underappreciated thing is the conversations you have that you can direct. And you can make them and in those conversations, again, if you're asking a single question over and over again, what are common mistakes made in this area? You will get passion, and you'll get frustration, and you'll get excitement, and then you'll start understanding why are mistakes made. And I always find that interesting.
I absolutely agree. Some years ago, I had one of my teams do something that I looked at and I said, gosh, guys, I think this is boring. And the response was, well, the content's boring. And I said, I don't believe that. I don't believe there's any content that's boring. There are certainly boring treatments of content, but I don't think the content is boring intrinsically. And so we had kind of a standoff on that, Clark. And I said, okay, you go find the most boring content you think you can find and bring it to me, and we're gonna do a design on it and see how it goes. I don't have time to tell the details of that, but I do want to tell you that we entered that program that we designed in competition, and we won the User's Choice Award for the most fun, interesting, you know, and it really was what you would otherwise say is boring content. But my thesis on this is parallel to yours, and I really like what you said about, you know, looking for the fun in it, because if you look hard enough, you're going to find it. And that's that nobody wants to go through the effort of creating a training program to teach you something useless. There's a reason for that they're teaching that. And if you think that knowledge is power, and we all like to be empowered, then there's something to hook on there. And I would say that both knowledge and skill are power. And so if you look at what it is that a person is now going to be able to do that they're not able to do now, and make the experience all around that, you are becoming a person who's competent in this. It's just not going to be boring. It doesn't come out as boring. Whereas if you're asking somebody to memorize some list or be able to answer questions on a post-test, it is going to be boring almost for sure, you know, if that's your target. So the time is waning, but I want to ask you, so what are students who enrolled in your course on short sims going to learn, and how are they going to be empowered by the time they've finished?
Great. So there's 5 sessions, and each session is very well carefully blocked out to take you through the design process of a short sim. So, well, people start the process with, you know, getting a tool that they like. Again, they're free tools for people to work with, and there's no expense there. And then going through the process of the interview, of the coming up with the setting, blocking out the first level of interactions, building from there, Again, first half of the course is sort of how simple can we possibly make it, and the second half of the course is how complicated can we make it. Let's make it a really simple, elegant structure, and within that elegant structure, now let's start fleshing out the complexity, start fleshing out the subtlety. Notion of interfaces. And again, one thing that you mentioned, is how many options can you give people? And I'm equally obsessed with the opposite. How few options can you give people? How do you give, I love binary interfaces, A or B, what do you want to do? Red pill, blue pill, make the choice. And, and so for me, often, in the assessment world, we think of distractors and we think about, let's get it past, let's just give people as often as possible. Obviously, most of the decisions that I have are 3 or 4, but if you can get down to a binary decision that's really interesting and has really interesting implications, to me, that's just like the real fun of it. So I love the binary decisions. And then building it out, added graphics where necessary, and then presenting it to people and getting some feedback, and then making changes. Again, the other really important thing about a simple design or an elegant design is that you do welcome feedback. If you when I've done detailed computer games, I don't want any feedback at all, because there's not much I could do with it at that point anyway. The more elegant your structures are, the simpler they are, the cleaner your lines, and it's a lot harder to make something simple than make something complicated. The more simple your lines, the more you welcome feedback, and the more you say, someone says, I really got to change these 3 things. Great, bang, let's do it, and you make them really happy really fast, and then being done. So over the course of 5 things, also between classes 4 and 5, we have a half-hour one-on-one with me, and we can go through your sim very, very specifically, and I'll make some suggestions, some of them good, some of them not so good. And in some cases I'll take over the reins and move a few things around and get it all nice. And people seem to like that a lot. But the other thing is, as we're going through this class, we're sharing it with each other. And that's really fun too, because we're all going through this together. And a lot of people said one of their favorite parts is seeing other people's sims and understanding, because we go from, hey, what's your idea, to what's your setting, to what's the basic interface going to be, to here it is done. We all know each other, and we all know each other's sims. And so my idea, as much as a writer's workshop or a playwright's workshop as it is I'm going to be all smart and I'm going to tell you all the answers and you're going to pay attention, it's it's that kind of sharing, and there's a bit of camaraderie by the end, and we do know each other, and we do see each other's solutions to problems. And there are times when it gets a little frustrating. Fear, uncertainty, and doubt is certainly part of my process. It's step 4.3 is fear, uncertainty, and doubt. It's always going to be there in terms of saying, is there a what's the structure for this? And sometimes we can ask other people and brainstorm too. So it's a nice collaborative experience, but it's learning by doing. I mean, you are going to be doing it, and what I'm going to be saying to you is going to hopefully help you do things more efficiently. But at the end of the day, you're going to be producing something, and you're going to be proud of it.
So clearly active learning. I just can't imagine the class of yours being boring. That's going to be good. There are some questions that are coming through here, kind of at the last minute. I want to ask one that I want to make sure that we get in, and then we'll try to squeeze in these others in the last 10 minutes that we have. What preparation would people have to take the course? Do they have to be instructional designers already? Do they need to know authoring tools or development tools already?
C++ and Ruby on Rails are absolutely requisites. I'm joking. You have to worry there.
Uh-oh.
No, you can use a mouse is nice. You can, if you've ever used basic PowerPoint stuff, I mean, it's very, again, everything about what my belief system is around accessible, simple skills. So there's nothing. Instructional design is not even necessarily a plus if you have an old school instructional design philosophy. It doesn't hurt, but it doesn't help either. So I think coming in some cases, coming in with an open mind and willingness to take a couple of risks, because there's a couple of steps along the way are non-intuitive, and you kind of have to trust them that they're going to work, and then they work them and you're happy. But so it's it's a bit of checking your ego at the door, perhaps, in terms of the right way of doing something, because those are the only students who have sort of gotten hung up a bit, is when they said, no, I'm coming in,
okay, great.
I'm going to do something my way, and you're going to help, kind of thing. And I'm happy to help, but it may not work. So I think an open mind and a general competence with a computer operating with the way that you do the way that you do mail and the way that you move boxes around. That's really about it.
I think even experienced instructional designers would find it useful. You mentioned an open mind, and
absolutely. There's no question that I think experienced instructional. I mean, for a lot of people, this is going to be their next career. This is going to be the path down which they go. And I guarantee when you've done a short sim, you want to do more. It's more fun. I mean, creating a short sim is a lot of fun. It's very satisfying. It's a lot of fun. It's really fun to watch people go through it because they're really happy. It's like, wait a minute, this is learning? You're kidding me. This is so cool. So it's a very, very exciting process. And people, again, I think it's very addictive. The other thing about short sim design is it takes a few minutes to, I mean, it takes a class to learn how to do it, but it is a lifetime to master. And there's a lot of people, frankly, who feel like a lot of people ahead of them got into storyline before they did, and they have a lot more experience with that, and they're almost sort of catching up or something, or they want to do something different. Short sims is that thing different. It's, it becomes a differentiator in terms of what you can do around people.
Yeah, yeah. Oh gosh, there are some interesting questions now. Can people contact you? Is there a way for them to reach out to?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm easy, Clark@shortsims.com, and I'll write that down. One question, I think it's right. One question about level design. When I mentioned levels, again, a good 10-minute short sim probably has 6 levels or 7 levels. Each level is about a minute long. It just becomes a way of organizing one's thoughts. We spend a bit of time going over ways of organizing, because if you don't organize, you go crazy quickly. So you really do need to be fairly good at organizing things. And levels are one way of doing it. You can move them around if you want to. I believe in a level design, almost like a computer game, where you start off simple and get more and more complicated. And you build on themes. And so I think coming up with the right level structure is usually pretty obvious for a sim, but it also provides a way of, again, keeping track of things.
And there was a good question about when subject matter experts just want to pour content in, all this stuff. How do you push back on that?
I mean, there are some people who just say, let's keep dumping the content, and usually you can do that. One other thing that you can do with short sims pretty easily is sort of say, let's say there's a term, I don't know, Machiavellian, whatever. And so you can have an option at any point in short sim to say, hey, if you want to, basically, if you want to know what Machiavellian means, press this. If you don't. And, so you have the ability for optional content that you hopefully, people can get sucked in if they want to or not. And so I think the ability to squeeze in a lot of content that has to be pulled by the player is another fun opportunity of a short sim, of saying, I want people to, if people go through that list I put up and play the ransomware short sim, there's a whole segment, it's probably a third of it that's optional. If here's how to avoid ransomware. And if you want to, you can go play and be the bad guy and figure out how a bad guy actually starts. What are the decisions that bad guy makes around ransomware in terms of getting you to click it and having the Word document download scripts and have it spread at the right time? How much do you ask for money? So actually learning about, how the bad guy is engineering the ransomware gives you tremendous insight as a sucker, as an end user, to avoid it. And so, but that's all optional. So there's a part of that sim where you say, hey, if right now it's a good time to learn about being a bad guy. If you want to do it, great. If you don't worry about it, keep going. And so it's that philosophy of content. And again, you can put a lot of, definitions of terms that way as well. If it's not absolutely critical that they learn it, a lot of experts are happy because, again, if people want it, they get it. And if they don't want it, they don't waste their time.
So I think one of the things that you'll learn in taking the course is the answer to a question that Mark Brown is asking, and I think it often comes up with respect to simulation-based learning, and that's that how do you map it out because of the potential combinatorial explosion? You make this choice, and then then there's 2 branches off that, and then you make 2 other choices, and so forth. It helps, of course, if you make all the choices binary. But I know that
not really, because as you know, as your combinatorics model presents, if you have 7 binary choices, you're not, you haven't saved yourself a lot of permutations. And if you have, 2 trinary choices, so, a binary choice, again, is inherently less growing, unless of course you have a bunch of them, which I like to do.
Yeah, right.
I think inexperienced designers love complex structures. And I think the more experience of a designer you get, the more you start really enjoying simple structures with really, really clever interfaces. And I think I say, you know, if you have 10 pounds of smart, put 9 pounds of it into the interface and keep everything else clean, but make the decisions fascinating, make the decisions interesting, make the narrative smooth. File this thing down and make it just an incredibly seamless experience. Don't get caught up in 7 parallel story paths or all that stuff will absolutely drive you crazy. So hopefully one of the things I'm going to help you with is how not to go crazy when doing them. And again, if you let the common problems be the North Star, if you let the user experience be the North Star, you're going to create some good things. If you are trying to be clever and seeing how clever you be, you will get creamed. And so there really is there's a lot of ways of going wrong, and hopefully the value of the class in a lot of ways is saying, here are all the easy traps to avoid, and here are here's where you want to focus.
Right. Well, Clark, thank you so much for this hour. This has just been fantastic. I'm sorry for all the people who didn't get to hear it, but I'm happy for all of those that joined us today. As we've been saying, there's an opportunity for everyone to learn these techniques that are powerful, provide the kinds of learning experiences really that everybody wants, both as the learner and as the organization that's training people. And it's practical. You know, it's not priced way out of range, nor perhaps even as much as the approaches that a lot of people take today. So it's just so smart to get up on.
You make sponsors happy and you make students happy. And frankly,
yeah, that's right.
Most programs do neither. And it's really fun to be able to do both.
And you can have fun doing it, you know, so it's a win-win-win, right?
And you're proud, and you're really proud, and you're creative, and you're clever, and you're smart, and it's a really, really great feeling to finish a short sim and see people react to it. It's one of the most satisfying. I mean, it is the most satisfying professional thing I've ever done, is create short sims and share them with people. And that's why I gave you a list, shortsims.com/examples. You know, play around with them or just watch the videos of other people playing. It's a very satisfying experience.
We've gotten just rave reviews, Clark, from your students. They felt it was just invaluable. And so what we probably should have done is raise the price, right? But instead, we're thinking this is the time to do it with this COVID and everybody at home and so much more use of e-learning in play. It needs to be better than it typically is, and it needs to be more affordable. It needs to be something that can be done faster. And so there are, you know, we're looking for all the ways we can try to kind of give back and help people during this period of stress. And so we decided to take a couple $100 off the class. So, but you got to get in, you know, because he can't manage 300 students at a time. So seating is somewhat limited, but that begins on August 24th. We also have Clark Quinn teaching. Clark is also extremely well known in the field of mobile learning, making the most use of it, not just overcoming its limitations, but actually building on its special capabilities and advantages. Another course that just gets absolute rave reviews. Clark does a tremendous job. And then Fundamentals of Design for E-Learning is really a very low price overview and beginning of the certification program that we have for e-learning professionals. And that also is getting just unbelievably great reviews. All three of these are just top notch. So, and that one starts September 21st. So I recommend that you check them out, register at allenacademy.com, or you can ask questions of the provost at alleni.com. And we hope to see lots of you again and soon in our webinars and courses. So thanks everybody. Thanks to the staff who made this possible, as well as special thanks to Clark. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for being here.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.